Have you ever noticed that the people who talk the most often have the least to say? And that those who truly command a room are usually the ones who speak last? There's a silent mistake you make every single day without realizing it. You believe that participating means talking, that being present requires an opinion on everything, that silence equals weakness. And that belief is exactly why respect slips away, credibility erodes, and power fades, while others move forward without uttering a single word. Today I'm going to show you why staying silent when everyone else is speaking isn't passivity, it's control, it's strategy, it's dominance. And by the end of this video, you'll understand a simple truth. Whoever masters their voice masters the entire room. Let's start with the obvious. Most people don't know how to stay silent. Put 10 people in a meeting and at least 7 will speak simply because they feel they have to. Not because they have something meaningful to add, not because their words will change the outcome, but because silence makes them uncomfortable. Because staying quiet feels inferior. Because deep down, they believe social existence depends on noise. That's the first mistake. The illusion that presence equals sound. That you're only noticed if you're talking. That if you don't voice an opinion, you don't matter. So you speak, you comment, you interrupt, you finish other people's sentences. You repeat what's already been said, just wrapped in different words, and you leave that room convinced you contributed. But the truth is the opposite. You diluted yourself. Every unnecessary word is a piece of authority you throw away. Every time you speak out of impulse, social anxiety, or fear of being invisible, you're teaching others not to take you seriously. And the worst part? You don't even notice it. You think you're participating. In reality, you're just making noise. Now look around. Who actually holds power? I'm not talking about job titles or positions. I'm talking about real influence. The people whose opinions shift direction, whose presence alone changes the energy of a room. They aren't the loudest voices. They're the quiet ones. And when they finally speak, everyone stops to listen. This isn't luck. It isn't natural charisma. It's intentional construction. It's the precise use of silence as a tool of power. And the good news is that it can be learned, but only by those willing to unlearn everything they were taught their entire lives. The principle I'm about to give you is simple, yet ruthless. In environments where everyone is shouting, the one who stays silent stands out, not through absence, but through controlled presence. Strategic silence isn't avoidance, it's calibration. It's understanding that your words only carry weight when they're rare, that you become indispensable when others rely on you to validate, conclude, or redirect a conversation. This doesn't mean staying quiet all the time. It means being selective all the time. You don't speak because you can. You speak because you should. And that distinction changes everything. Let me give you an example you've already lived. Picture a tense meeting. Someone introduces a controversial idea. Instantly, 3 people start talking at once. One defends it, another attacks it. A third tries to mediate. The temperature rises, voices overlap, and in the middle of that chaos, one person hasn't said a word. They've been observing, listening, processing. Then silence appears, because even chaos needs a pause. And that person finally speaks. One sentence, direct, clear, no detours, and that's it. The discussion ends. The decision is made, because when someone who rarely speaks chooses to speak, the impact is different. This isn't coincidence, it's social architecture. You build authority through the scarcity of your voice. And once you understand that, you stop competing for attention. You start managing attention. Now I'm going to show you how this principle plays out in real situations, and where you're getting it wrong without even realizing it. First, work meetings. You walk in thinking you need to prove you're engaged. So you comment on the slide. You verbally agree with someone. You ask a question that's already been answered because you were busy preparing your response instead of actually listening. And when it's over, you leave feeling productive. But the truth is, no one remembers what you said, because you were just another voice, just another person filling space. Now flip the scenario. You enter the same meeting and say nothing for the first 20 minutes, but you're fully present. You're observing. You're noticing who's hesitant to speak, who's trying to steer the conversation away from the real issue, who has the solution but isn't being heard. And when the right moment arrives, not the moment you want, but the moment the room needs, you speak. You connect dots no one else connected. You bring clarity where there was confusion. and the entire room remembers that you spoke, because you didn't speak to exist, you spoke to resolve. Second example, social settings. That dinner, that group of friends, that casual conversation where everyone wants to talk, wants to laugh, wants to impress. There's always someone who talks louder, faster, longer, and there's always someone who stays quiet, who smiles, who listens, who asks the right questions. And by the end of the night, who is everyone most curious about? Not the one who talked the most, the one who held back the most. Because silence creates curiosity. It leaves room for projection. People start wondering what you think, what you do, whether you approve or disapprove. And the less you speak, the more space you occupy in other people's minds. Not through manipulation, but through natural scarcity. You become valuable because your opinion isn't guaranteed. It has to be earned. Third example, conflict. Someone attacks you verbally, tries to provoke you, to diminish you, to pull you into their emotional chaos. You have two options: react immediately or say nothing. Most people react because they believe silence means agreement, that not responding is losing. So they enter a war of words where no one wins and everyone comes out smaller. But what happens if you stay silent? If you look, absorb, and refuse to give ammunition? The attacker loses footing because they expected a reaction. They needed your response to justify their behavior. And when you deny them that, you break the game. You show they have no control over you, that you decide when and if your energy is spent. And that is devastating, because controlled silence in a conflict is the loudest display of emotional dominance. Fourth point, you've probably noticed that people who talk too much eventually contradict themselves. They exaggerate, they overpromise, they expose inconsistencies, because the more you speak, the more surface area you reveal, the more material you give others to challenge, discredit, or ignore. And the less you speak, the fewer weak points you expose. You become impermeable, not because you're hiding something, but because you're choosing exactly what to show. Which brings us to the most dangerous mistake of all: confusing silence with passivity. Many people believe that staying quiet means being weak, that not reacting is submission. So they talk, react, defend, explain, constantly. And they get trapped in a cycle where they must prove their value over and over again. But you don't need to prove anything when you know how to build presence without relying on volume. Presence isn't sound. Presence is density. It's the weight you carry when you walk into a room. And that weight doesn't come from how many words you've spoken. It comes from how many you could have spoken and deliberately chose not to. Now let's get practical. How do you turn this into real behavior? Step 1. Identify why you're speaking. Notice when you speak out of necessity and when you speak out of anxiety. Every time you're about to say something, ask yourself, does this need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said right now? If the answer to any of these is no, don't speak. Hold it. You'll quickly realize that nearly 90% of what you were about to say didn't need to be said at all. Step 2. Train the pause. When someone asks you a question, don't answer immediately. 3 seconds. Just 3 seconds of silence before you respond. This does two things. It gives you time to calibrate your answer, and it signals that you're not reacting. You're responding. Reaction is instinctive. Response is intentional. And the person who responds instead of reacts always holds more control. Step 3. Observe before you opine. Walk into a new environment and spend the first 15 minutes simply observing. Who talks the most? Who talks the least? Who carries real influence and who only carries volume? You'll start to map power dynamics that used to go unnoticed. And once you know who's who, your words become strategic. You'll know who to align with, who to answer, and who to ignore. Step 4. Eliminate excess. Every time you speak, cut your message in half. If you planned 3 sentences, deliver 1. If you had 5 examples, use 2. If you were about to justify your position in 10 lines, compress it into 2. Impact doesn't come from quantity, it comes from precision. The cleaner your communication, the stronger you'll appear. Step 5. Stop filling social silence. You're in a conversation. A pause happens. Silence. And instantly, you feel the urge to say something, anything, just to relieve the discomfort. Don't. Let the silence exist. Breathe. Smile if you want. But don't break it out of anxiety. The person who can sit comfortably in silence controls the tempo of the interaction. Step 6. Talk less about yourself. The more you talk about your achievements, opinions, and stories, the less interesting you become. Because you're giving everything away. There's no mystery left, no curiosity. Instead, ask questions. Listen, genuinely. And when it's your turn to speak, be concise and leave room for interpretation. People value what they have to decipher far more than what's handed to them fully formed. Step 7. Accept that you don't need to be everywhere. You don't need to join every conversation. You don't need an opinion on everything. You don't need to correct every mistake you hear. You don't need to insert yourself into every debate. You can simply opt out. And that isn't avoidance. It's choice. You're preserving your energy, your credibility, and your impact for the moments that actually matter. Let me tell you something no one teaches you. The world isn't waiting for you to speak. It's waiting for you to deliver. And delivery has nothing to do with volume. It has everything to do with timing, with relevance, with weight. You can speak less and change everything, or speak constantly and change nothing. The choice has always been yours. Staying silent when everyone else is talking isn't weakness. It's refusal. A refusal to play the game of who shouts the loudest. A refusal to chase attention. A refusal to dilute yourself just to prove you exist. Because you already do. And once you understand that, you stop trying to prove anything. You simply are. And the moment you finally speak after remaining silent while others filled the space, your words aren't just heard. They're anticipated. They carry decision. They end conversations or begin new ones. And that is real power. So the next time you find yourself in a room full of competing voices, remember this. The person who speaks last rarely needs to repeat themselves. Stay silent, observe, choose. And when it's your turn, don't waste it. Because you only need to speak once when you know exactly what to say.